I am 72 years old and I carry on my back a lifetime of work, losses, and silences. But nothing prepared me for what I experienced that night. Tell me something. What would you do if, in the middle of a dinner with your own child, you received a message saying, "Get up and go. Don't say anything to your child"? There are things that we go through and don't even know how to explain properly. Sometimes, you feel like something is out of place, but you don't want to believe it. Especially when it involves blood from your blood. And that's exactly what happened to me. The kind of thing that makes us rethink everything we've built, everything we've sacrificed, and if it was worth it. In this video, I'm going to tell you, step by step, what happened that night. It's not just any story. It is a warning, an outburst, and more than anything, it's the unvarnished truth of a father who believed too much and nearly lost it all for it. In the end, you will understand why that night I got up from the table, and I was never the same again. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. That night, as I smiled with the hot plate in front of me, trying to reconnect with my son after a whole year of not speaking, my cell phone vibrated. A message from a number I had never seen before, and the words were there, cold as ice. Get up and go. Don't say anything to your child. In that second, something inside me broke. What was supposed to be a night of reconciliation became a scenario of mistrust. And even without understanding, I obeyed. I got up from the table and left without looking back. If you've ever had the feeling that you're being deceived by the ones you love the most, then maybe you understand what I felt. And if this story somehow touches on something inside, please stay with me. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Not out of obligation, but to show that even in silence we can still find people who understand what it is to be forgotten, betrayed, and even so, continue standing. Because telling this story is not easy. But with you here, it feels less lonely. The call came on a Thursday morning shortly after 9. I was in the backyard as always, pruning the rose bushes that Ellen planted. The phone rang and by instinct, I wiped my hands on my shirt and answered without even looking who it was. And when I heard that voice, it was as if time took a strange turn. It was Michael. 1 year, a whole year without a message, without a, "How are you, Dad?" without a Christmas card. And now he called me Big Daddy, as he did when he was a child. My first impulse was to hang up, but my hand trembled, and my mouth became dry. He asked how I was, if I still lived in the same house. He said he missed it, that he was ashamed to have walked away like that. Those were beautiful words, and I wanted so much to believe. He spoke of his new home in Montclair, a chic neighborhood in New Jersey. He said that he and his wife, Emily, wanted to receive me for dinner, that they were going to prepare the dish that Ellen made. Remember that roast with rosemary, Dad? We thought about doing the same. I heard that and felt a knot in my chest. It had been so long since someone had said my name fondly, even if it was false, that I accepted it before I even thought about it. I hung up the phone and sat down on the chair on the porch. I stayed there for a good few minutes looking at the cloudy sky. I don't know if it was hope or fear. I only know that, inside, something was stirring, a mixture of relief and distrust. But hope, this damn thing. She speaks louder when we have had an empty heart for too long. The next day, I went to Mr. Kaplan, on the corner of Main and 12th. I picked up a new suit, navy blue, understated, as Ellen liked. At home, I spent my old cologne, the one she said smelled like a dignified man. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw an old man with sunken eyes, but alive. I stopped by the Italian market and bought a bottle of good whiskey. To open the night with my son, I told the attendant, trying to smile. But I don't think I even convinced myself. I went back home and took the frame of Ellen's photo off the nightstand. I took it with me, wrapped in a handkerchief. He didn't want her to be alone, even in thought. It was as if I needed her blessing. Before leaving, I looked at the clock in the living room. There were 6 sharp, scheduled time. I took a deep breath, closed the door calmly. The app car arrived soon. The driver, a nice guy, asked if it was a special dinner. I said, "It's more than that, my son. It's the chance to fix time." On the way to Montclair, my head went far. I thought about all the Christmases I had waited for Michael, the times I went to the hospital alone, in unanswered messages. But I also thought about the good memories, the day he fell off his bike and cried on my lap, in Ellen's smile when the two cooked together, The pain of absence is a kind of silence that only those who live can explain. And look, if you've ever waited for a call that never came, if you've ever looked at your phone with a heavy heart for someone you raised with all love, tell me in the comments. I understand. I've lived it. It touched me. Anything. Sometimes we just need to know that we are not alone in this feeling. Arriving in Montclair, the car stopped in front of a huge house, all lit up, with those wide windows and a white magazine facade. It wasn't my son's face, but maybe he had changed. Or maybe I got out of the car with the bottle of whiskey in my hand, adjusted my suit, and knocked on the door. The light inside was on. I heard laughter. And on the other side, a world of appearances was about to open up. But what I didn't know was that that dinner was not a reunion. It was a trap. And the worst, it's just that I went in with an open heart. Do you want to know what I saw when that door opened? Wait and see. Because it was there that everything began to fall apart. Emily opened the door. Beautiful, too neat, with a tight dress and a smile that looked like she was trained in the mirror. "Robert, what an honor to have you here," she said, hugging me tightly as if we were close, intimate. But her eyes said something else. They looked at me as someone who measures, as someone who calculates. Right behind came Michael, a little hurried, smiling, hitting my back. "Dad, it's good to see you." And he repeated it about 3 times, as if he were trying to convince himself. I walked in slowly, with the bottle of whiskey in my hands. The house was a palace. High ceilings, spiral staircases, crystal chandelier, furniture that looked like it came out of an expensive magazine. It was all beautiful, but there was something there that didn't match. It wasn't my son's house. Michael has always been simpler, more earthy, you know? That seemed to be borrowed, or assembled, and I could smell the exaggeration, the smell of the new that tries to hide the rotten. Emily led me into the living room, complete with an electric fireplace, a giant screen on the wall, and white flower arrangements scattered around every corner. We sat on the couch, and she started talking about the house, the neighborhood, the important neighbors. "The mayor lives 3 blocks from here," she said, as if that impressed me. As she spoke, Michael went to get glasses. I noticed that he avoided looking at me for a long time. There was something in his way, the shoulders more slumped, the hand that trembled slightly. When he returned with the glasses, he offered me the whiskey, not the one I took, but another, already opened, in a decanter. "Let's toast, Dad, for the new beginning." I hesitated for a second, but accepted the cup. I didn't drink. I just touched my lips. Emily looked at me sideways, as if he was expecting some reaction. And that's when the housekeeper appeared. Mary, brunette in her 50s, dressed discreetly. She entered the room slowly, carrying a dish towel in her hands, and looked at me in a way that still gives me goosebumps. It was not fear, notice. As if, with her eyes, she said, "Stay tuned." She didn't say a word. He just greeted me with a slight nod and disappeared through the back door. I tried to ignore the feeling, but the discomfort did not go away. Michael and Emily kept talking nonstop, now about investments, future plans, retirement. "Have you ever thought about selling the restaurants, Dad? You must give a good hit." I disguised myself and changed the subject. I started walking around the house, feigning curiosity. The walls had modern paintings, very expensive. A black grand piano occupied half of one of the rooms. In the hallway, a sideboard with very expensive bottles of wine. And on top of it, a frame with a photo of their wedding. They were smiling, but even in that photo, the smile of the two seemed to me forced. I passed an office with the door ajar. I saw a red folder on the table with loose papers, my name stamped on one of the sheets. But before I could get closer, Emily called out, "Dad, come see dinner. We prepare everything with care." I came back, trying to look natural. The smell of the food was good, and the table was spotless. But inside me, something was already out of place. It wasn't just the sudden luxury. It was their behavior. It was the excess of kindness, the interest in my things, the way they avoided details about how they had gotten that house, the way Maria looked at me. Everything screamed that this was not a reconciliation dinner. It was a spectacle, and I was the target. But what exactly were they trying to do to me? And why did I start to feel so weird after 2 sips of that whiskey? The table was beautiful. White plates with golden details, tall bowls, napkins folded like fleur-de-lis. The food was smoking, and for a moment I almost believed that it was real, that my son and his wife were there to welcome me for real, out of love, out of longing. But the truth gave signs, small, almost imperceptible, but present. Emily pulled me by the hand gently and settled me at the end of the table. You stay at the head, of course. He is the guest of honor. Michael poured my glass. And it wasn't the whiskey I brought. It was the other, the decanter. I tried to joke, but aren't you going to try what I brought? He laughed and said that his was already at the ideal temperature, that later we would open mine. I took 2 sips, and already in the second, a strange heat rose up my back. I took a deep breath, kept smiling. Maria served the dishes with trembling hands, rice with almonds, roast beef and wine sauce, vegetables and butter, everything perfect, too perfect. As we ate, Emily asked me if I had been to the doctor lately. How's your pressure, Robert? And memory? Is it forgetting things? I answered carefully without going into length. Michael, in turn, praised my lucidity, said that I looked younger than ever, that many parents my age had already passed everything on to their children. And you, with so much wealth, still work every day? He laughed. But behind that laughter, there was a charge. They began to talk about succession planning, of getting everything in order. Emily said they had a lawyer friend who took care of these things with delicacy. To avoid bureaucracy in the future, you know. It's better to decide now, while everything is fine. I smiled from the side. It wasn't the first time that someone had suggested this kind of thing to me. But coming from my own son after a year without looking me in the face, it tasted like something cold. Michael brought up the subject of restaurants. You still have the Brooklyn part, right? And the one in Newark? And that lot in Queens? How did he know I still had the lot in Queens? I never talked about it with him. I looked at the plate and breathed. I tried to take the conversation to the other side. I talked about Ellen, her recipes, how she liked to see her family together. But even in this, they had rehearsed answers. Emily praised Ellen's lasagna, the one with 4 cheeses, right? So special. But Ellen hated gorgonzola cheese. He always hated it. And that lasagna she made only with 3 cheeses, that lit an alert inside my chest. Mary appeared again, offering water. When he passed behind me, he lightly touched my shoulder, as if apologizing, or perhaps as if to say, pay attention. I kept looking at her hand. He had a simple wedding ring of worn gold. It's a scar on my wrist. Thin, old. She trembled. Emily then stood up and said, We'll be right back, Dad. We're just going to look for one thing in the office. When the two left, Maria approached in silence. He left a small tray of bread and next to it whispered, Don't drink anything else. And he left. My heart raced. I tried to get up, but my legs weighed down. The light seemed brighter. The food now made me nauseous. And at that moment, the cell phone vibrated in my pocket. A message. An unknown number. 4 words. Get up and go. Don't say anything to your child. My breath froze. And there, with the phone in my hand, I realized that I was not at a reconciliation dinner. I was in an ambush. But who had sent me that message? And what exactly were they trying to do to me in that house? I read that message more than once. The words flashed on the screen like an urgent but silent order. Get up and go. Don't say anything to your child. My heart jumped. My hands were sweating. All around, the cutlery hit the plates, the voices followed, the fake laughter filled the air. But for me, everything was muffled. Michael's voice turned to noise, Emily's face distorted into a mist. That was not just a warning. It was a muffled scream, coming from somewhere I couldn't see, but that I was familiar with. I feigned a malaise. I put my hand to my stomach and said I needed to go to the bathroom. Michael jumped to his feet, but I reassured him. It must have been the seasoning. I'll be right back. I walked slowly to the hallway, my cell phone hidden in my pocket and my soul on fire. But when I turned left, I didn't go to the bathroom. I went to the kitchen. Maria was there, with her back turned, washing glasses. The sound of running water filled the room, but she seemed to feel me enter. She stood still, holding a glass without looking at me. I stood still too. 2 strangers who knew more than they could say. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. And she didn't say anything. He just looked away discreetly to the back door. It was ajar. An icy wind was passing through her. That was my only way. And I understood. I approached the door, my steps heavy as lead. Behind me, the sounds of dinner seemed more distant. With each step, my head was spinning. That whiskey. I didn't drink so much to feel like that. There was something wrong. A heaviness in the body, a slowness in ideas. But I still had lucidity. I opened the door and left. The garden was dark, but the moon lit the way to the side gate. The wet grass sank under my shoes. I didn't look back. The only thing I thought was, go, and don't say anything. I walked down the street as if my life depended on it, and maybe it really did. I took my cell phone and called a car. Trembling hands, dry mouth. When the car arrived, I got in quickly. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, perhaps startled by my expression. I gave my address. On the way, I took a deep breath and leaned my head against the glass. That's when I decided to respond to that mysterious message. I just wrote, "Who are you?" The answer came quickly. "After I'm safe, I'll explain. Don't go back to that house. Look, I'm here, opening my heart, telling this story the way I lived. If you're listening, really listening to me, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. I still have a lot of things in store to tell you. Stories that like this never leave our hearts again. And sometimes sharing a piece of that pain with someone, it already helps to move forward. But let me tell you, when I got home that night, everything seemed even emptier, but I was alive. And something told me that the truth was much worse than I imagined. The question that hammered into my head was, what exactly were they trying to do to me that night? And the answer came soon after. As the car turned the corner from Michael's house, I felt my hands start to tingle. His chest hurt in a weird way. It wasn't a heart attack. It wasn't anxiety. It was a poison that I didn't see, but that was already running inside me. I tried to keep my head up, but my vision blurred. And deep down, I knew that if I had stayed there for 5 more minutes, maybe today I wouldn't be here telling this story. The driver, a young man named Jamal, looked in the rearview mirror a few times. He asked if I was okay. I said it was just an indisposition. Lie. It was fear. It was sadness. He was a man who realized, too late, that he was put in the crosshairs by his own son. The city passed slowly outside. Stores closing, people leaving bars, streetlights shaking. And there I was with a bottle of falsely cooled whiskey burning in my throat and a question that wouldn't let go. What did they want from me? I took the cell phone and called the number in the message. The call fell straight into a feminine voice, calm, firm, but distant. "Robert, are you safe now?" That voice knew my name. "Who are you?" I asked. She did not respond with a name. He only said, "What they did to you today has a name. The substance they put in their whiskey is called Zetralon, a consciousness inhibitor used in psychiatric clinics. He acts fast. It leaves the person vulnerable, confused, obedient. You could sign anything, and then I wouldn't remember anything." I couldn't answer. The throat froze. The voice continued, "They were going to put you to sign the transfer of your properties. They already had everything ready. Deeds, powers of attorney, records. They were going to film you, make it look like you were aware and conscious. And tomorrow, when you wake up, it would be too late." I was silent. The only thing I could do was put my forehead against the glass and close my eyes. Michael, my son, the boy I carried in my arms when he fell from the swing, the same one who cried in my chest when his mother died. "Had you done this to me?" The woman further explained, "Michael owes more than $300,000 in illegal gambling. He tried to get the money from loan sharks, and now there are people after him. Emily was the one who architected everything. She is the one who manipulates. Dinner was the final act." Jamal turned right and warned that we were arriving in Staten Island. I just whispered, "Why are you telling me that?" On the other end of the line, she took a deep breath. "Because someone needed to stop it, and because you have an ally in there." The call dropped. The phone screen went black, and in that second, I knew. Mary. It was her. But who was that woman on the call, and how did she know so much about my life? I needed to go back, but not as a guest, as someone ready to see the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. The question now was, how many lies were still hidden in that house? When I got home that night, I didn't turn on the light in the living room. I went straight to the kitchen, washed my face in the sink, and sat on the chair where Ellen used to drink coffee. The silence of the house was different now. It was no longer the silence of solitude. It was the silence of shock. I was still under the effect of Zetralon, I knew. The head hurt, the body weighed, but the mind was awake in a way it hadn't been for years. I took out of my pocket the photo frame with Ellen's photo, the one I took with me to dinner. I looked into her eyes and remembered something she said a lot. If they ever make you feel strange in your own house, pay attention. And that's what I did. I went to the bedroom, opened the document drawer, and took out the black folder where I keep the restaurant papers, the land records, even the life insurance contract. I spent hours reviewing everything. There were things there that even my son didn't know. But some, he did know. And that's when I understood. Those days when Michael appeared out of nowhere, asked about my health, about whether I wanted to retire for good that wasn't taken care of. It was calculation. I remembered the day he showed up with an investment proposal in a sports betting app. I said that it was the future, that it was easy money, that with $5,000 my profits would triple. I denied it. I stood firm. He disappeared for weeks after that. At the time, I thought he was just frustrated. But now, everything fell into place. $2 million. That's what the woman said he owed. $2 million spread among loan sharks, illegal gambling, clandestine casinos, and who knows what else. The house, the cars, the furniture, everything was a facade. The only way he saw to get out of this was to pass the bill to me. The father, the old man, the naive. I looked at that house, my house, and for the first time, I felt expelled from it without anyone saying a word to me. Because the betrayal of a son, she doesn't scream, she whispers. It comes disguised as a hug, an invitation, a laugh at dinner. And if you've made it this far with me, I ask you, continue, because what I found out after that, it went much deeper. It was the kind of thing that changes the way we look at everything. That morning, I sat on the bed and left the window open. The cold wind from Staten Island came in slowly. I thought about Michael's childhood. I thought about the smell of his hair when he was a baby, the first time he cried for fear of thunder, the time he asked to sleep in our bed because he had nightmares. And I thought about how that same boy, he had become a man capable of doping his own father for money. I picked up the phone and wrote to the woman from the unknown number. I asked her how she knew everything. The answer was short. You have been followed in recent months. His movement drew attention. Someone needed to warn you. It was strange to think that someone outside was protecting me while my own son tried to erase me. But I still didn't know everything. There was still a detail, a name, a missing piece on this dirty board. And this piece. I was going to show up the very next day when an unexpected visitor knocked on my door. But who was this person? And what she carried in her hands? That made my world turn upside down again. The next day, I woke up with a dry throat and a heavy heart. The brightness of the sun hitting through the crack in the window brought no relief. It was as if the world had turned different during that night. I got up slowly, prepared my coffee, and stared at the kitchen landline for a few seconds before dialing. I called the Montclair police station. I spoke calmly, firm voice. I said my full name, my address, and everything that had happened the night before. The dinner, the whiskey, the substance, the attempted fraud, the plan to get me to sign my own assets. On the other end of the line, the detective listened in silence until the end. When I said my son's name, he took a deep breath and said, "His name has already appeared in other complaints. Nothing concrete, but there are records. You did well to call, Mr. Robert." He promised to send a team to Michael's house that night, but he needed a formal request. He said that if I agreed to return to the house with a hidden microphone, they could use the evidence. I was silent for a moment. To go back to that house, where everything was set against me. But something inside me ignited. It wasn't anger. It was dignity. I lived too long to end my days as a deceived old man. I said, "I'll be back, but I want justice. Not revenge. Justice." I hung up the phone and went to my room. I took out of the closet an old notebook with a leather cover, yellowed by the decades. On it, the names of each person who worked with me in the restaurants were written. I wrote everything down there. From the waiter who started washing dishes to the manager who became a partner. Loyal people. People who built with me. And there, leafing through those pages, I remembered what real value is. I sat down at the desk and began to write down what happened, line by line, word for word, because if by chance I didn't come back, someone would need to know the whole truth. And look, there are moments in life when we need to stop and breathe. And think, how did we get here? How does a father who has done everything for a son get to the point of having to denounce him? The truth is that there is pain that we don't wish even for the worst enemy. And if you've ever had to choose between protecting someone and protecting yourself, comment below with a, "I know how it is," or a, "I understand you." Because carrying that weight alone, it's not easy, no. When the car arrived, I went in silent. I took nothing but the coat, the wallet, and Ellen's portrait in the inside pocket. Along the way, I watched the streets, the hanging wires, the sidewalks wet from the rain of the night before. I thought about how our lives can change in the blink of an eye. Yesterday, I was an old man going to dinner with his son. Today, I was a witness. Arriving near the house, the car stopped 2 blocks away. As agreed, I went downstairs with the microphone hidden in the lapel of my coat, and the detective handed me a button in my pocket. If something gets out of hand, press it. I knocked on the door of Michael's house with the same lump in my throat as the night before. But now, I was ready. What I didn't expect was who would come to open the door, because at that moment when it opened, it wasn't my son who was there. It was someone else, and that person would change everything. Who opened the door this time was Michael himself. He was wearing the same shirt as the previous night's dinner, but with the sleeves rolled up to the elbow and the collar half crooked. His face had that glow of suppressed sweat, as if he had just been woken up by a disguised worry. As soon as he saw me, he forced a smile, and it was the most fake smile I've ever received from him in my life. "Dad, what a scare. We were worried." He disappeared like that. Behind him, Emily appeared with perfect makeup but slightly swollen eyes as if she had spent the night awake. "Robert, are you okay?" she said, coming closer, putting her hand on my arm like the last time. I smiled, a calm smile. I lowered my head and shook slowly. I had a dizziness. I thought it best to take a breath. I ended up going for a walk. It was good. It put its head in the right place. They swallowed the excuse without contest. Maybe because they really needed me to go back to that stage, to such reconciliation. The trap, disguised as affection. Emily motioned for me to come in. "We had a hearty breakfast," she said. "You didn't even get to try our apple pie. Remember?" That of Ellen. Remembered. But the way she lied, she might not even know what Ellen's pie looked like. I entered the house with calm steps. 2 plainclothes police officers were positioned in the front car, and another walked around the block with a cap and newspaper under his arm as a well-rehearsed extra. I knew I wasn't alone, and even so, I felt naked. The house was exactly as it was the night before. Everything in place, as if nothing had happened. But now the eyes with which I saw that scenario were different. I didn't see luxury anymore, via staging. Every cushion on the sofa, every gold-framed painting, every scented candle was part of a theater, and I was the character they needed to play the old fool. Michael pulled the chair from the bedside to me. "Sit down, Dad. I'll get your whiskey." We didn't even toast properly. He already knew what I liked, or pretended to know. Emily laughed, talked about a trip they were planning to Napa Valley, but he didn't look me in the eye. When Michael came back with the glass, I saw it. In the background, a light residue, almost imperceptible like dust, stuck to the crystal, a sediment that shouldn't be there. He placed the glass in front of me and raised his. "Now, yes, to our new beginning." I lifted mine, touched my lips, but I didn't drink. I looked deep into his eyes, and at that moment I felt a twinge of everything I had carried in the last few days. The pain, the fear, the memory of the voice on the phone, the image of Ellen telling me to pay attention. The only thing I could say was, "It's good to be back, son." But what Michael and Emily didn't know, I didn't come back to toast. I came back to finish what I started, because the next sip someone was going to take, it wasn't going to be whiskey. It was going to be of the truth itself. And this, my son, this one can't swallow. The conversation at that table was like a scratched record. The same polite words, the same polite smiles, the same repeated toasts, trying to cover up a truth that had already revealed itself entirely to me. Michael brought up financial matters in a rehearsed way, as if he were offering security, when in fact he just wanted control. Emily spoke of the importance of succession organization, of how it would be a relief for me to leave everything in place now while I am well. Each sentence came with a fake sugar that no longer sweetened me. I looked at both of them as if it were the first time, not as a father, not as a father-in-law, but as a man who knows when he's dealing with people who don't see you anymore. He only sees what you have. Michael gesticulated a lot. He avoided my direct gaze as if he feared that I would see behind the curtain, and and I could see the sweat on his neck, the way he swallowed hard every time the word document was mentioned. Emily, on the other hand, kept the pose, but I watched my every gesture as someone who analyzes a mouse in the labyrinth. When I raised the glass, she leaned her body slightly forward. When I put the glass to my lips and didn't drink, she crossed her legs tightly. Small signs that gave everything away. The food was there, fragrant and warm, but I barely touched it. He pretended to chew, pushed with his fork. I wanted them to believe that everything was as before, but what was really, it was my attention. I counted seconds. The time between each look they exchanged. The interval between each "Dad, you trust us, right?" and each "You deserve to rest." They wanted me to sign something that morning. That was clear. They just didn't know they were being recorded. That my return was not a gesture of weakness, and it was a strategy. And look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes we think we're alone with the pain, but it's not. Returning to the table, Michael got up and went to the bookshelf. He took a navy blue briefcase and brought it to me. "Dad, they're just drafts, but I wanted your opinion." He put it on the table. "Will, power of attorney, these bureaucratic things, nothing official yet, but you know, it's good to keep in mind." Emily served more whiskey. I let her do it, because in that game, the more they felt in control, the more distracted they became. I took the folder. I leafed through it calmly. I recognized deed copies from the restaurants, all the way to the land in Queens. There, in the middle of the paperwork, was a ready-made statement, with my name, my signature scanned, barely printed. I closed the briefcase, took a deep breath and said, "Michael, remember the old restaurant in the Bronx? The first?" He smiled, confidently. "Of course. The one with the red facade, right? Where I cleaned the tables." I nodded. "Do you remember the name of the cook who worked there with me in the early years?" He blinked a few times. He swallowed. Javier?" I smiled. "It was Maurice. Javier came only 2 years later. But that's okay, son. Memory is a treacherous thing indeed." Emily looked away. Michael was silent. I finished the last sip of the coffee, not the whiskey, and pushed the glass away. "You know, Michael, the worst part of getting older isn't the body that hurts. That's when we realize that the people you love the most, they don't see you as people anymore. They see it as an obstacle, as an anticipated inheritance." He turned pale, and I hadn't even pressed the button in my pocket yet. But the time would come, and when it arrived, not even they were going to be able to stage what would come next, because someone about to lose everything, he usually shows the worst of himself, and that's what I needed, the worst of them. Live, recorded, for everyone to see. But what no one knew is that Mary was listening to everything from upstairs, and what she kept, it could change everything. Emily stood up with that rehearsed way, too sweet smile, too light steps, saying she was going to get dessert. "You're going to love it, Robert. I made that old cheesecake recipe you liked." I just smiled with a corner of my mouth as if thanking, but inside I already knew that even the candy was part of the theater. As soon as she disappeared down the hallway, I looked discreetly to the side. Maria was standing at the edge of the kitchen door, pretending to arrange the silver cutlery on a tray that was already too tidy. I coughed lightly as if asking for a moment. She understood. He came to me with short steps, head down. When he got close, he didn't look me in the eye. He spoke with his mouth almost closed in an almost faint whisper. "They think I don't understand English." And with firm but trembling hands, he took from his apron a small, transparent plastic package with a white powder inside. He delivered as someone who delivers a secret that weighs heavily. It was hidden behind the vodka. Same thing as yesterday. I took it carefully, wrapped it in a fabric napkin, and kept it in the inside pocket of my coat. It was not just a test. It was what was missing. She continued, her voice now breaking. "They rehearsed everything, Mr. Robert. They rehearsed what to say, how to smile, when to touch your arm. Yesterday, Mrs. Emily said, 'Today is the final night. Today is the final night.'" That echoed inside me like a warning bell. I thanked her with my eyes, lightly shaking her hand. He said nothing. Words did not fit at that moment. Maria was the only person in that house who still saw a human being when she looked at me. And look, if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that evil never stands on its own. He always slips in some detail, And it was at that moment, with that little packet hidden in my pocket and my heart racing, that I was sure their fall was near. And if you're still with me here, listening to this old man open his soul, I tell you, don't let go of my hand now, because what's next? It's what changes everything. Emily came back with dessert. Strawberry cheesecake with the syrup running slowly across the plate. Here it is, special to you. I thanked him. I gave it a small spoonful. Everything was performance. Even the taste. Michael pulled out the document folder again and placed it on the table. Dad, if you can just take a look at these papers later. It's just a formality to give you security, you know? Only we were really involved. Trust from father to son. I leaned the spoon on the plate and looked at it calmly. Of course. I take a look, yes. And he smiled. The smile of someone who thought he was winning. But at that moment, at that very second, a shadow appeared from the end of the corridor. And what this shadow said, he paralyzed Emily in place. Because what was coming now, no one could stop it. Michael returned from the kitchen with calculated steps, balancing the bottle of whiskey in his hand as if carrying a trophy. The amber glow of the liquid reflected off the white walls of the room, and for an instant the sound of the liquid pouring into the glasses sounded like a countdown. For the family, he said. Emily added, for new beginnings. I just held the glass and swirled it slowly, watching the dust move in the background, discreet, almost invisible, but I knew it was there. He knew what that glow disguised, and the bitter taste that came along with the sweet of deception. I took a deep breath, gave a faint smile, and said, before the toast, I want to tell you a story. They looked at each other, clearly impatient, but disguising it. Do you remember, Michael, the day you were born? He chuckled nervously. Dad, that was half a century ago. Yes, it was. And yet, I remember every detail. I put the glass aside and put my hands on the table, as if I wanted to feel the time. Her mother, Ellen, spent 14 hours in labor. He screamed, prayed, cried, but he did not give up. When you finally came into the world, so small but with your hands closed, she looked at me and said, this boy is going to have a good heart, Robert, a heart that will change the world. My voice cracked slightly. Emily straightened her hair, annoyed. Michael stared at the plate, his fork motionless. You know, son, I remember when you were little, and I came home tired from the restaurant, and you came running to hug me. It smelled of soap and sweet bread. You said that one day you would take care of me when I got old. He said he would never leave me alone. He looked up, swallowing hard. Father, please. No, son. I need to finish. Because certain promises are not just words. They are roots. And it's curious how memories work. They come back out of nowhere with smells, sounds, even the weight of touch. And sometimes, it is these memories that save us. Because they show who we were and who we ceased to be. If you're listening to me now, you've already had a memory that marked you forever. Right here in the comments. I want to read it. I want to know what was kept in your heart too. I raised the glass slowly. His mother believed that every man had within him the power to do right, even when it was easier to make mistakes. The glass clinked with the slight trembling of my hand, but not from fear. Really. Emily tried to interrupt. Robert, the whiskey is going to heat up. Let's toast soon. I stared at her. Yes, let's toast, but to the truth, Emily, always to the truth. Michael ran his hand over his face, distressed. Dad, what do you mean by that? I put the glass to my mouth and stopped in the air. Silence spread across the room. Do you remember the promise you made to me when I was 12, Michael? His glass shook. The color fled from his face. Emily looked at him confused. What promise, love? He did not answer. And at that moment, I noticed. The house was no longer their stage. It was mine. And the next move, it would be theirs. Or that of the police, who should already be on their way. But who would be the first to break the silence? The silence after my question seemed to carry weight. Michael lowered his gaze, pretending to laugh, trying to escape. Dad, should I remember all the promises I made as a child? I just leaned the glass against the table, the dry sound echoing between us. You should do that, yes? Because it was the only one that did, looking into my eyes. You were 12 years old, and you told me you would never do anything that would embarrass your mother. The air seemed to disappear from the room. Emily looked at him, confused, and tried to regain control. Robert, you're tired. It's normal to confuse things. But I cut it with the calmness I'd learned from a lifetime of storms. I'm not confused, Emily. I'm more lucid than you think. I took the napkin out of my pocket and placed the small sachet on the table. The white powder reflected the light from the chandelier. Emily put her hand to her mouth. Michael turned pale. Do you know what this is? It's what you guys put in my whiskey. I didn't think I'd notice, right? But Maria saw it, and she listened. He heard you rehearse, plan what you were going to say, every gesture, every word. She just didn't know the name of the substance. I found out yesterday. Zetralon. Michael stood up sharply, his hands shaking. This is crazy. What are you accusing me of, Dad? I kept my gaze fixed on him. To try to kill me, son. Or leave me alive long enough to sign my own sentence. Emily tried to intervene. Robert, that's absurd. You must be... Enough. My voice came out firm, low but sharp. I don't need to prove anything to you anymore. It's all here. I took the cell phone from my pocket and placed it on the table, with the recording still in progress. Since I entered this house earlier today, everything that has been said has been recorded, and there's more. The Montclair police are coming here. They know what you have tried. They know about the debts, the false documents, the loans with loan sharks. I told you everything. You have only forgotten one thing. The silence of an old man is sometimes the most dangerous trap. Michael staggered backwards, as if the ground had moved. Emily was paralyzed, her face hard, colorless. You wouldn't do that to us, Dad. Not with his own family. I stood up slowly, resting my hands on the table. Family is the one who cares, Emily. Who protects. What you did was something else. This here, I pointed to the sachet, is the kind of love that kills slowly. He tried to move forward to get the cell phone, but I was faster. I held the device tight and took a step back. Don't even think about it. If you touch me, the recording goes straight to the police station. And if there is still a remnant of the boy I raised, Michael, feel it. Now. He obeyed. For the first time. Without a voice. The clock on the wall marked every second with a loud, deafening sound. I could hear his own heart beating to the same rhythm. You knew that I would not sign anything in good conscience. So they plan to dope me, but they forget that for a man who has already lost everything, fear no longer scares him. I lost your mother, then I lost you. Today I have nothing more to lose, and that makes me the freest man at this table. Emily cried silently, but her eyes were still looking for a way to escape. Robert, we can solve this. No police, no scandal, just the three of us. I interrupted her with a look. You've already solved it, Emily. They just haven't understood the price of the resolution yet. I took 2 steps back, letting the sound of the sirens approach outside. They came growing from the hill, cutting through the calm morning air. Michael covered his face with his hands. Dad, please. I made a mistake. I messed up. I just wanted time to pay. I stared at him. Time? You've had a lifetime of time. The problem is that he never learned his value. The blue lights began to flicker through the windows, dancing over the light walls and the crystal glasses. The house, once perfect, now looked like a crime scene. Emily sobbed softly, muttering something I no longer heard. And in that instant, as the sound of doors slamming and boots echoing in the hall mingled with the wind, I realized that at last, the silence of that house was no longer mine. It was theirs. But something was still missing. One last detail. A voice that needed to be heard before the handcuffs. And it came, slowly, steadily, with light steps, emerging behind the stairs. Because when Mary appeared holding her apron in her hands, I knew. The truth at last had a face. The doorbell rang with a sound that seemed to pierce the walls and time. Michael jumped up, his face white as lime, trying to regain control. I answer, he said, forcing a calm tone, but his voice failed halfway through. When he opened the door, 2 men in dark suits entered. Slow movements, attentive eyes. One of them showed the badge, the other just greeted with a short wave. Mr. Robert? Asked the loudest. I nodded. Emily took a step back, her body shaking. What's going on? She asked. But the question came out more like a whisper from someone who already knows the answer. Michael tried to laugh nervously. There must be a mistake, officers. My father is confused. He's been taking strong medicines, you know how it is. Age. The police looked at each other, impassive. The youngest opened the briefcase and said, We received a formal complaint of attempted fraud, poisoning and falsification of documents. We're going to need to collect some items from the house. Emily brought her hands to her face. My God, no. That's a misunderstanding. Michael walked up to her, as if seeking support, but she backed off. At that moment, the silence was interrupted by slow footsteps down the stairs. Maria appeared, holding her apron tightly, her face serene but decisive. The older police officer recognized her by the name I had given in the report. "Mrs. Maria, can you walk us to the kitchen, please?" She nodded and gave me a look that said more than any words. "It's over." As the officers collected the cups, sachet, and documents from the office, Michael began to walk in circles. Sweat ran down his temple, his shirt collar open. "I didn't want to do any of that, Dad. You don't understand. It was the only way out. They were going to kill me." He pointed his finger at me, trying to turn guilt into pity. "You've always had it all. I just wanted a chance, a damn chance." I remained seated, looking at him, not as a judge, but as someone who finally sees what he was blinded by for love. Emily began to sob, stumbling over her own words. "I didn't know anything, I swear. It was him, always him. He forced me, Robert." Michael turned to her, furious. "Lie. You said to use the medicine. You said it was easier that way." And then, in front of the two of them, I realized the love they pretended to feel for each other was as fake as everything they had built. The poison they put in my cup was the same that had been running between them for a long time. The police returned from the kitchen. We confirmed the toxic substance. It goes to the laboratory, but it is enough for preventive detention. Michael took a step back, his hands in the air. "Please don't take me. I can give it all back. I can—" Emily tried to walk away, but one of the officers held her wrist firmly. "You are going to the police station. There you explain everything." I stood up slowly. The weight on his shoulders seemed less than ever. I looked at Michael one last time and said in a calm, almost fatherly tone, "You didn't make a mistake out of desperation. They made a mistake because they saw me as a disposable old man." He lowered his head, not daring to face me. Emily was crying loudly, and the sound of the handcuff closing on her wrists sounded like the end point of a book that should never have been written. Maria cried softly near the door without looking at me, but I knew. She cried for all of us, for the things that money destroys, for the love that is lost when respect dies. When the police took the couple, I was alone in the living room. The smell of whiskey still hung in the air, mixed with the sweet scent of dessert. It was the smell of the end. I sat down again, looked at the still full glass in front of me, and thought of Ellen. She would have understood that silence, and he would have said, "You did what you should, Robert. Your way, with dignity." But I still didn't know that this story, as much as it seemed closed, kept one last secret. And this secret, it was hidden in an envelope that Maria herself left on the table before leaving. The police station smelled of reheated coffee and old paint. The sound of phones ringing, doors slamming, voices crossing. Everything seemed distant, as if I was watching from outside myself. I sat on a metal bench in the hallway while two police officers took Michael and Emily to testify. I saw them both from the back, and for the first time, they didn't look big or dangerous or cold. They looked small and empty, the kind of void that we dig ourselves. When the police chief called me in, I followed him in silence. He greeted me respectfully and said, "Mr. Robert, you have an impressive calmness. Few would react like that." I just replied, "Calm down, delegate. It's tiredness. Those who have lived long enough learn that shouting is not always the best way to be heard." He nodded, noting something. Minutes later, they brought Michael into the room, handcuffed, his hair disheveled, his expression haggard. He looked at me with red eyes, of someone who finally understood the size of the abyss. "Dad, I need to talk to you. Just for a minute." The chief looked at me, waiting for my answer. I consented with a nod. Michael sat down before me. For a few seconds he was silent, taking a deep breath. Then the words began to come out, tangled, shaky. "I made a mistake, Dad. I got lost. I should have asked for help. I should have been a man to take on my debts. I was desperate. And Emily, she said it was the only way out." Tears streamed down his face, falling into his handcuffed hands. "I swear I never really meant to hurt you. I just thought I could fix it later." I looked at him with the same look I used when I taught him to ride a bike, when he fell and scraped his knee. The same look I gave him when he first asked me to borrow money, saying it was just for a quick investment. But now that boy no longer existed. "Michael," I said in a low voice, "you threw away what your mother and I built. He tried to erase me as if I were a signature, not a man." He sobbed. "I know, Dad. I know. I'm going to change. I'll pay. I just want a chance. Son, I replied, the problem has never been money. It was the value. He looked at me confused, and I continued. Money is won, you lose, you work to have it again. Value. Either we carry it or we don't have it. And when you lose the value, the rest collapses with it. On the other side of the wall, Emily could be heard crying. The chief commented quietly. Mrs. Emily confessed to part of the plan. She said that she was manipulated, that she was afraid of her husband. He said that you seemed like an easy man to deceive, but that you regretted it. I took a deep breath. Fear makes people lie even to themselves, delegate. But the regret, this one always comes after the damage. Maria, firm, gave her testimony afterwards. He told what he saw, what he heard, without trembling in his voice. I just did what was right, she said. He always treated me with respect, and respect is something that the world is forgetting. When she left the room, she looked at me and smiled slightly. That simple, good smile was the first human gesture I received after days of deception. And look, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling we help another heart to breathe. Like this video and sign up. And let's make this story reach those who need it. Because forgiveness, when it comes, is not always for those who made a mistake. Sometimes it is for those who are tired of carrying the weight alone. When Michael was taken back to the cell, I was alone a little longer. The chief came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, "It is rare to see a case like this in which the father survives the attempt. Even rarer is to see such a calm father." I looked at him and replied, "When we lose everything we love, delegate, we learn to choose what is still worth fighting for, and sometimes what's left, it's just one's own conscience." I left the police station in the late afternoon. Montclair's sky was leaden. The light rain was beginning to fall. Every drop seemed to wipe away a piece of the shame that remained. But the envelope that Maria left on the table, this one still weighed on my hand, because inside him, there was something I didn't expect, something that could still change the meaning of everything that happened. And what I found in there, to this day it keeps me up at night. The days that followed were strange. It was as if the world had woken up with me. I was no longer just the old man from Staten Island who gardened and ate in silence. Now, all of a sudden, I was the betrayed father who survived. Newspapers knocked on the door. Reporters left notes in the mailbox. Headlines read, "Elderly businessman escapes own son's Montclair scam." The words echoed, heavy, repeated, as if trying to make sense of something that had no explanation. I read and reread the headlines, but it felt like they were talking about someone else. I didn't see myself there, because the truth is that no one wants to be an example of tragedy. The police continued their investigations, and what came to light was much worse than I imagined. They discovered that Michael had already used my name in shell companies, forged signatures, tried to sell properties that were not even his. The adulterated whiskey was just the last act of a story he had been writing in the shadows. When creditors began to show up one by one, collecting debts and threatening lawsuits, I realized that his ruin didn't start at dinner. It started when he chose the easy path and thought that his father's love would cover any lack. The interviews and reports multiplied, and in all of them, there was an old black and white photo of me from the time when Ellen and I opened the first restaurant. Whenever I saw that image, I remembered her laughing in the kitchen, with a wooden spoon in her hand and a sweaty forehead. She said, "Robert, everything that is solid builds slowly, and maybe that's why our restaurant survived. Because back then, without me noticing, Ellen put clauses in the contracts, clauses that protected the family's assets, requiring that any sale or transfer be contingent on the signature of both of us. Even after I was dead, she protected me. Her hand still guided what was ours. And you know, it was at that moment that I understood the true meaning of love. Love is not who says I love you out loud. It's the one who thinks of you when you already know you're not going to be around anymore. Ellen did so, and that's why, even after everything, nothing was lost. The newspapers wanted my speech, they wanted images, they wanted the crying, but I didn't want to show up. The chief even said that my story inspired. "You are a symbol of strength, Mr. Robert." But I didn't feel any strength, only silence. I spent the morning sitting on the porch, watching the wind move the leaves, listening to the cars go by. Sometimes someone would stop in front of the gate to greet me. "You are a hero," they said, and I just waved politely, because the hero for me was the one who still had the heart to forgive. And I still didn't know if I could do it. In the midst of all this noise, the envelope that Maria left on the table was still there, closed. I didn't have the courage to open it. It was like a door that I didn't know if I wanted to go through. Only after a week, on a rainy morning, I sat at the kitchen table, opened a bottle of cheap wine, and decided to face it. The envelope had her handwriting, shaky, firm at the same time. Inside, a letter, 2 pages, and something wrapped in brown paper. Before reading, I just stared. I thought of Maria, of her eyes, of the way she stood firm even in the midst of so much dirt. I thought about how simple people are sometimes the bravest, and that's when I realized there are people who cross our path just to remind us that there is still truth in the world. If you've come this far with me, because what was in that letter changed everything. It changed the way I saw my own history, my past, and even what I thought I knew about Ellen. Because sometimes fate doesn't end when justice comes. It just begins to reveal itself. And what I found inside that envelope, it was the last piece of the puzzle, a truth kept for 20 years. But why did Mary have that? And why didn't Ellen ever tell me? It took me a few days to get the courage to call Maria. The letter she left moved me more than I could admit. Inside the envelope, in addition to the 2 handwritten pages, was a small old photo. Ellen and I, very young, in aprons, smiling behind the counter of the first restaurant. And behind the photo, a note in my wife's handwriting. If one day I'm not here, choose someone who sees you as a person, not as profit. I understood right away. Mary was that person. So one Sunday morning, I picked up the phone and dialed the number I found at the bottom of the letter. She answered in a low, tired but sweet voice. "Mr. Robert?" I smiled. "It's me, Maria. How are you?" There was silence on the other side. Then she said, "Trying to follow, sir. I lost my job after the house was seized, but I don't regret it. I slept peacefully for the first time in years." I took a deep breath. "Peace is a rare thing, Maria. And boy, too. But you conquered yours." She laughed lightly, a little embarrassed. "Not everyone understands this." I told her about the new restaurant I was setting up in Crown Heights, a small corner place with wide windows and the same kind of hardwood floors that Ellen loved. I said I was starting slowly again, at my own pace. And then, with the calmness of someone who decides what is already decided, I said, "I want you to come work with me. General manager, fixed salary, health insurance, signed contract and legal protection. Everything clean. Everything in the right way." On the other end of the line, silence extended. And then came the crying. Not that loud, desperate cry. It was a contained, grateful cry, the kind of cry that comes when life decides to give a second chance without warning. But why, Mr. Robert? Why me? I looked out the living room window, the sun piercing the curtains, the world outside moving slowly, and I replied, "Because you had the courage to do what my own son didn't, Maria. You saw me as a human being." She tried to say something, but her voice failed. We were silent, listening only to each other's breathing until she said, "I do, and I promise not to disappoint you." I smiled. "Don't promise me anything, Maria. Just keep being who you are." In the following days, we started renovating the restaurant. I chose every detail, every color, every aroma. I wanted it to be a place where honesty smelled and sounded. Maria came early every day, helped the bricklayers, made coffee for everyone. She looked different, lighter, like someone who was finally breathing on the right side of life. Sometimes I saw her looking at the counter and smiling to herself. When I asked her why, she replied, "It's just that I never thought I'd feel at home again." And there, in the midst of the dust and the noise of tools, I understood that perhaps the new beginning was not mine alone. It was hers too. News about the case still appeared on television from time to time, but I didn't watch it. He let the world speak for itself. He preferred to hear the sound of the kettle beeping, the smell of coffee spreading, the noise of chairs being arranged. It was the music of life playing again, at the right pace. And if you're listening to me right now, I'll tell you, forgiveness isn't always forgetting. Sometimes it's just the act of continuing. Keep walking, breathing, believing. On the eve of the inauguration, Mary brought flowers, daisies, the same ones Ellen planted in the garden. "For good luck," she said. And when we went out to see the illuminated sign, the name reflected in our eyes, Ellen's Corner. She looked at me emotionally. She thought of it, wasn't she? I shook my head. "It was. And it was you who reminded me why." But that night, as I turned off the lights in the hall, something stopped me. A new envelope left under the door. No sender. The calligraphy. Familiar. I trembled as I picked it up, and I thought, is it possible that the past still had something to say? Coming home after everything was like entering a world that I knew, but that seemed new. The same creaking gate, the same sound of the wind hitting the trees, the same smell of coffee that has been impregnated in the walls for so many years. But now the silence didn't weigh me down. He hugged me. I went in slowly, took off my coat, hung on the chair, and went straight to the kitchen. It was there that time stopped for me. I took Ellen's mug, the same one with blue flowers, and washed it carefully as I did every day. The warm water running through his fingers, the soap running down his fingers. A small gesture, but full of meaning. The radio on the shelf softly played a song from the 70s, one of those she hummed out of tune while making dinner. I looked at the refrigerator. The photos were still there, but different. Ellen and I's in the restaurant, on trips, in the garden, all in the same place. But Michael's, the one she loved, holding the diploma. I took it out, not angry, with tired love. It was as if I said, "Now, son, it's you who needs to find yourself." And sometimes the act of letting someone go is the only way to continue loving without hurting yourself anymore. I sat down at the table with the clean mug, now full of coffee, and looked out the window. The garden was in bloom. The daisies that Ellen planted were born again. And I swear that for an instant the wind seemed to bring her voice soft, telling me that everything was fine. I opened the drawer where I keep the memories, notes, recipes, old photos. There I found a yellowed envelope, folded carefully. I recognized her handwriting immediately. It was the last note Ellen wrote before leaving, but I had never been able to reread it. My hands trembled when I opened it. The words were simple, direct, and crossed me like a knife and affection at the same time. If one day our son chooses the wrong path, don't follow him. Walk steadfast, even alone. His road is not yours, but love, our love, will always be the ground that supports you. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt no anger, no sadness, only a gentle peace, which came from understanding that everything has its time, even the pain, even forgiveness. The afternoon sun began to invade the kitchen, gilding everything. That warm glow hit the window glass and reflected right on top of her photo. It seemed that the world for a moment breathed along with me. And you know, it's funny how life, even after so much fall, still finds a way to fix itself. I don't know if it's God, fate, or just stubbornness, but the fact is that our hearts always try to bloom again, even after being stepped on. I got up, put the letter back in the drawer, and walked over to the front door. The cold wind from Staten Island came in slowly, carrying the smell of wet earth. I stood there, looking at the garden and thinking about everything that had happened. I thought of Michael, in the boy who was once my pride and in the shadow he has become. I thought about Ellen, and how she, even far away, still took care of me. I thought of Maria, there in the restaurant, preparing everything for the opening, and how perhaps life had given me a second chance, not to start over, but to say goodbye in peace to what was left behind. I picked up the new envelope, the one someone had left under my door days ago. The handwriting seemed familiar to me, but there was something different, more trembling, more urgent. I took a deep breath, closed the door, and sat down again at the table. Ellen's mug was still warm. The radio kept playing. And I just thought, had the past come to ask for forgiveness? I opened the envelope carefully, my heart racing, and found a single folded, handwritten, unsigned sheet. The words, trembling, said, "Dad, I'm trying to change. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I still remember the smell of Mom's coffee on Sunday mornings. If one day I can be half the man you were, maybe I deserve to start over." It was Michael's handwriting. I folded the letter slowly, without tears, without anger, just a good tiredness, the one that comes after the storm, when the silence makes sense again. I put the note along with Ellen's in the same drawer. Perhaps in the end, the two of them would still talk somehow, one asking for forgiveness, the other offering peace. I closed the house, put on my coat, and walked to the new restaurant. The morning air in Brooklyn smelled of fresh bread and new paint. The facade of Ellen's Corner was still being finalized, but inside the place was already pulsating with life. Maria was waiting for me with a clean apron and a smile that was worth more than any fortune. I greeted each employee by name, gave soft instructions, arranged a chair here, a towel there, and sat in the usual corner, where the sun beats down the window and the coffee arrives hot and strong. I watched the movement, people talking, laughing, working, and realized that for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I took my battered notebook, the one in which I write down ideas and memories, and wrote one last sentence. Family is what protects you when no one is looking. I closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and let the smell of coffee and hope fill the air. Today, when I look back, I understand that life is not about what we lose, but about what we choose to preserve inside our chest. I learned that love is not a guarantee. It is a daily choice, and that forgiveness is not forgetting. It is ceasing to carry the weight that no longer fits. Pain has taught me what time confirms. To be strong is not to never fall. It is to know how to get up with dignity. If you've ever had to start over from scratch, if you've ever been hurt by someone you loved, know that there is peace after chaos. It arrives slowly, with the smell of coffee and the sound of simple life. And now, really, I want to thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. It was long, I know, but it was from the soul. If this story touched something inside, give me a gesture of affection. Leave your like, which for me is like a hug that warms up and gives meaning to continue. And if you want to come back for more conversations like this, subscribe here to the channel. It's like promising me that you'll come back for the next coffee. Tell me in the comments which city you are listening to me now. I want to know how far this story has come. And please, activate the bell. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again. As I walk the streets of Brooklyn and see the lit sign of Ellen's Corner, I feel that each step is a silent prayer, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. Because even with all the losses, I still had the essentials left. The courage to love again even after being broken. And perhaps that's what keeps the flame of life burning. Faith in new beginnings. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.